today, we're in this, over the summer, kind of a rewind is kind of what we'll call it, of looking at some of the Bible stories that some of us have grown up hearing as kids. And we're working alongside Rachel in the kids ministry, and what we're talking about here, she's talking about in there. So kind of try to open up conversation among families. And, we talked about Jonah a couple weeks ago, and Jonah and the whale, and how God just provided for Jonah a way out. Last week we talked about Jesus being tempted. Jesus being tempted in the wilderness, and how through those temptations he was guided by the Spirit, and how the Lord was with him, and how God was with him to use Scripture to overcome those temptations. And today I want to look at a story in the Old Testament, so the front half of the Bible, and this will be it will kind of be a multi-part sermon, if you will. So we're going to do one this week, and I don't know how many more weeks will go, but I know for sure at least next week as well will be part 2, maybe part 3 after Brandon. And but I want to look at the exile of the Israelites and them wandering in the desert. How it started, where it started, what all happened leading up to it, and why it's important for us today. You see, if we can look at the Old Testament and we can read all these stories that we read, and we're like, how did that actually happen? Like, did that actually happen? Because we see in the New Testament, Jesus tells parables, which are just stories, and they didn't actually happen, but it's just a story of something that teaches a lesson. Now, this part of the Bible actually happened. We're going to look at Exodus chapter 3. So if you have a Bible, if you need a Bible, there's one on the table. Feel free to use your phone, whatever. But Exodus chapter 3 is where it all started. Now I'm going to let you know, I'm not going to be camping out on one portion of Scripture. We're going to be moving around, hopping around. But we see in Exodus chapter 3, good morning. How are we doing, guys? We see Exodus chapter 3, this man named Moses. And who was this man named Moses? Well, Moses was born during a time of oppression. Moses was born in a time where the king, the pharaoh of the area, was like, hey, I don't want any of these Israelite babies, especially the men, to stay, or these little baby boys, to stay being born. So we're going to kill them all. And Moses happened to obviously be a boy, and his family, his mom, was like, hold up. Like, no, like there's something different about him. So she hid him. And then she put him in a little basket, a little wicker basket, nice and cute. Filled him with tar, put him in the river. And at the time, the Israelites were enslaved. They were in Egypt, in this land to where people, they were working for the Egyptians. The Egyptians were whipping them, keeping them in line and making them work hard at this time when Moses was being born. And we see Moses being born, his mother taking care of him. And I love it. I love the story of Moses and what all happens. So, as he was being hid, we start to see Moses' life take place. And I think it's important for us to realize that. Because we fast forward now to Exodus chapter 3. So Moses was raised in Pharaoh's house. He was raised in this high, pristine area. He was given everything. He was literally given everything. Keys to the kingdom, if you will. And what happens? He's out wandering, and one day he sees an Egyptian beating the Israelite. Something inside his heart is like, that's not right. So what does he do? He goes out and he actually kills the Egyptian. And then he tries to hide the body. Come on now. Here we are to catch a murderer now. So he kills this dude. And he's like, yep, I'm going to just take his life. Hides him. And then the next day he's out there and he sees 2 Israelites fighting. And he's like, dude, guys, chill out. What's going on? They're like, what, you're going to kill us too? And he's like, oh snap, I got found out. I better run. So he hightails it out of there. He runs. He goes, gets married. Father-in-law, his name's Jethro. You'll hear that name spoken. And he's hiding out. He's chilling. He's like, man, I don't want to go back there. They're going to kill me. It's terrible. So Exodus chapter 3 picks up. And we're going to look at, starting in verse 4. So, I'm sorry, I got to fill in a little bit more. So Moses is walking in the field and he sees this bush. This is Moses in the burning bush. The bush is being burned up, but it's not being consumed. Now, fire obviously consumes things. So Moses is like, yo, that's awkward. What's happening there? So he walks over to see it. And then Exodus chapter 3, verse 4 says, when the Lord saw that he had gone over to take a look at the bush, God called to him within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals or your shoes, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Now I'm not going to take my shoes off for you, because you all might faint and die. I'm not wearing socks. My Toms, or dudes. Not Toms, I don't know Toms. They're too small for my feet. My dudes. So they stink really bad. My wife can attest to that. But he sees this bush and he's walking up and he's like, that's awkward, that's weird. And all of a sudden, some voice speaks out of this bush and he's like, yo, that's a little sus. There you go for all you high school, middle school kids. Trying to be relevant. That little dance. But he sees this and God's like, take off your sandals, this is holy ground. Like, holy ground? Dude, there's manure probably right there. There's dirt. This is, okay. But Moses doesn't question it. Look what it says. It says that he takes off his sandals. Verse 6, then he said, I am the Lord of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, because he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of the slave drivers, and I am concerned about their suffering. So I've come down to rescue them from the land of the Egyptians, and to bring them up into the land of a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Pizraelites, Hivites, and Jebusites. Nailed them all. There you go. That's that old Greek and Hebrew coming in that I have not taken yet. And now the city of Israel, and now the cry of the Israelites has reached me. And I've seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now go, I'm sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people to the Israelites out of Egypt. I love this. Moses, what we see is Moses is walking. He's being just walking where he normally would probably just trot and hang out, tending his flocks, chilling, like, oh, cool. And then he's like, a bush. Okay. And God's like, watch what I'm going to do here. Boom. Speaks to him, guides him. It's funny because Moses actually, he had a stutter or a lisp or something, and he wasn't good with words. The story continues to where God starts revealing to Moses what he's going to say. Hey, I'm going to tell you what to say to Pharaoh when you go. I'm going to tell you that these are the things that you should do, and this is how you should do it. And Pharaoh's going to probably have a hard heart and say, nope, no dice. And what's going to happen is then eventually Moses says, send someone else, because I can't speak. Send someone else because I don't know how to craft words. I don't know about you, but sometimes in pressure of this world or pressure of fear of public speaking, like words sometimes can be hard and we can stammer, we can stutter. For me, because I love talking to people, oftentimes I'm like, I talk too much, and it gets me in trouble. Well, if I tell you that, we'll be admired and I talk too much. So God sends him his brother Aaron to go on this journey with him. Now, it's going to be a hard journey. See, Moses goes with his brother Aaron. They appear before Pharaoh. They say, hey, the old Bible school song, Pharaoh, Pharaoh, let my people go. If you know it, it's not, yeah, you're old. I'm sorry, he just are. But he appears before Pharaoh, and he says, God says, let my people go. And Pharaoh's like, no. And he's like, okay, I'm going to drop my staff, and it becomes a snake. And Pharaoh's like, huh, that's pretty cool. Watch what these dudes can do with their magic. Boom, becomes a snake. And Pharaoh's like, yep, there you go. Moses is like, okay, now what? So through this whole time, God is just revealing himself to Pharaoh. He revealed himself to Pharaoh through Moses, saying, watch what I can do. And he sends down a bunch of plagues. Now, as I read these plagues, I want you to think about how nasty they are, okay? One of them is blood in the Nile River. The river ran through. It was their drinking water, their source of water for their livestock and for themselves. They would bathe in it. They would take care of themselves in it. And all of a sudden, it's boom, turned to blood. I don't know if you ever smelled blood, but it doesn't really smell great. I mean, I don't know, chicken blood doesn't smell great. Cow blood, deer blood doesn't smell great. So now they're looking, they're going, oh man, how am I going to get water? How am I going to feed my livestock? How am I going to drink? How is this all like, boom, it's just blood. And it starts to stink. So they couldn't eat, they couldn't drink. He sent frogs all over the land. Now, frogs are, we found out last night as we were hanging out with Jeremy and Amanda that they're actually pretty hard to draw, but they're pretty nasty creatures actually too. Like frogs are pretty nasty. And frogs are just all over the place. Gnats, flies. He sends a plague that the livestock will die. He sends hail, boils, locusts that will eat up all the crops in the land. Darkness. But the one that finally turned Pharaoh's heart was the taking of the firstborn. The firstborn of every herd, of every person, of everything. So all these plagues happened. And Pharaoh was sitting there watching going, okay, there's something going on here. But it's interesting because some of the plagues didn't affect the Israelites. Pharaoh's watching. He's going, interesting. So from chapter 3 until chapter 12, that's a quick synopsis of Exodus. Chapter 12 has this story where Pharaoh finally relents. He finally lets go. And says this, verse 31 of Exodus chapter 12. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron. And he said, up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds as you have said, and go. And also bless me. So this man who has a hardened heart, who's like, no, this isn't going to happen, not a chance, is now saying, go, leave, get out of here, but as you leave, bless me. Take every remnant of you with you, because I don't want any of it left. Then the Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country. For otherwise, they said, we will all die. So the people took their dough before their yeast was added, and carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in cloths. So they took their bread with them to have food on the way. For those of you that know me, you know I like some good food. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people. And they gave them whatever they asked for. So the Israelites plundered the Egyptians. That's crazy to me. Okay? These Israelite slaves walk into their masters, if you will, like, yo, give me this, give me that, I'll take that. Oh, Apple Watch, yep, hand that over. Brand new iPad, yep, I'll take that as well. Oh, brand new 2024 Ford F350 turbo diesel, 6-inch lift kit, yeah, give me those keys, baby, come on now. And they're like, I'm going to take everything. Forget all you guys. I want it all. The old High School Musical song, right, Brandon? I want it all. Well, I'm glad you haven't seen it. So, obviously, I haven't seen it either. So we see them walking. We see the Israelites leave this land. We see God's hand is in fact on them. They left with a lot more than they came with. But it's also interesting because during this time, the Egyptians were so scared of them. In the 420 years that they were in captivity, they reproduced like chickens and rabbits. They just kept on having kids. 600,000 Israelites walked out of that land. That's why the Egyptians were so scared. Because there were so many of them that they were scared they were going to overtake them. And they knew if this is God's chosen people, the God of Abraham, of Isaac, of Jacob, they knew that God had some higher power that they couldn't tap into. Now, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, those are figures throughout the Old Testament. To where Abraham said, I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the grains of sand on the beach or on the seashore. I'm going to make you so many. And so many people. You're going to have so many people. And that's passed down to his son and his son. Now, Pharaoh, being Pharaoh, didn't want them to leave fully. His heart was still hardened. Now, the Israelites, they didn't know this at the time. They're booking it, man. They're free. They're like, let's go. Bye, Felicia. We out. We're going to a land full of milk and honey. I like some milk and I like some honey. It's representative of sweetness, of goodness. See, God takes them from a land that they're begging to survive out into the wilderness to where now they're no longer relying on other people, but now they have to rely on God. See, I think a lot of us, we can get so comfortable in our situations. We get so comfortable that we forget to depend on God. That when times get tough, we look and we say, man, wouldn't it be better for me to do something else? Through this wandering in the desert, the Israelites continue to test Moses, to test Aaron, to complain. Wouldn't it be better for us just to die in Egypt? Wouldn't it be better for us to just stay there? At least we had food. We had shelter. We had all these things. Wouldn't it be better for us to do that? Man, we're hungry. Give us some food. And God's like, I'll prepare it. Don't worry, I got you, fam. I got you. So they're walking, and then they come to this spot called the Red Sea. And they show up on the shore, and they're like, that is deep. That is wide. Let's turn around and go back. And they turn around, and what do they see? They see that the Egyptians were following them. And that Pharaoh was there waiting for them. So here they are. They're hungry, they're thirsty, they're dying, they're tired. They walk along the way. And then they turn around and like, these guys again? Come on, really? And Moses is sitting there going, okay, don't worry guys, God's got a plan. God's got a plan. And this is the crazy part. God tells Moses, take your staff and stretch it out over the sea. And as he did that, the sea parted. The sea parted, and the scripture tells us that a strong east wind came and blew all night, so the land was dry. And then it says that God created a pillar of fire between the Egyptians and the Israelites, so that they could not attack them and overtake them. That this huge pillar of fire was what was guiding them by night. And this pillar of fire was standing between them all night long while the sea is drying up. Now, I don't know about you, but I've never walked down the beach and just been like, parked. Like, Bruce Almighty, or Evan Almighty when he's like in the coffee. Like, don't act like y'all haven't seen it. Come on now. Where he splits the coffee. Like, that's what it was like. All of a sudden, it just split across, and the whole ground became dry. And what happens? The Israelites go across on this dry land. And as they're going across, I'm guessing probably at least they have a good head start on them. They turn and they see the Egyptians are following them, and I'm sure they're like, oh, they're on my tail, let's book it now. Like, they're going to be like Gibbs running the ball for the touchdown. He's not paying attention, that's right. He's going to be like Gibbs running for the touchdown, sprinting, going crazy. Or like that lady on the rugby team in the Olympics stiff arming that chick. I think that was sweet. Like, they're just booking it, man. They're going. And they turn and see the Egyptians are like, man, now what? They're going to come too. They all get across. Moses turns around and goes, boom. Sea closes back in. That was really loud and really good. I'm actually impressed with that. The sea closes back in. I'm not your own creature. I'm sorry. Sea closes back in, and what happens? Scripture tells us that all the Egyptians perished that day. Historically, we can still see on the bottom of the sea the chariots and the wheels of the chariots that the Egyptians were on. That they have historically found these things in the bottom of the sea. And they're like, man, this exact place, exact moment, exact spot where the Egyptians all died. And Pharaoh died with them. See, it's awesome to me because, I don't know about you, but that all seems pretty radical. That seems pretty crazy, pretty out there. Like, really, a dude just walked up to the sea and was like, boom! And the sea split. He turns around and after he's through, he's like, boom! And kills all his people. A pillar of fire? Like, that would be kind of sweet, but also like, whoa, hold on. Like, that must be really hot. Like, I mean, I know how hot my bonfires can get, and like, it must be really, really hot. I can't imagine being that close to it. See, I love this because what it shows us is that God is capable of doing radical stuff, not only through us and in us, but also around us. That He can show us, and He can take us to places where we may never be able to go. The Israelites were standing there saying, how are we going to go across? And God's just like, oh, you simple-minded people. Trust in me and watch what I'll do. Let me be your God. Let me guide you. Have you forgot everything I did for your father and your father's father? Have you forgot everything I've brought you to and through? And you see this story of the Israelites wandering and leaving Egypt leads to so much more in the Scriptures. And I love it because what happens next, and we'll discover it next week, a little cliffhanger there for you, is we see God's power through all of our temptations. Through the Israelites wandering and asking, what is happening, God? Why, God? And I find myself often asking the same thing, why, God? Why would you do this? Why would you do that? Why would you not do this? Why would you not do that? Why would you give them money and not me? I mean, come on, don't I deserve it? Right? Like, come on, man, don't I deserve the 85 acres with the 5 horses and 16 cows or whatever? Like, I deserve that. And I'm like, why, God? Why'd you give it to these people, not me? And God's like, oh, you simple-minded fool. Watch what I'm going to do. And we see this. The whole book of Exodus and the whole rest of the Bible takes place because of this. The whole book of the whole story of the Bible happens because the Israelites faithfully obeyed, sometimes disobediently and sometimes unwillingly, that they obeyed God. And we see this story of salvation come through this. That God takes these people wandering, tested, tempted, wondering, and that He fulfills His promises to them. See, this promise of going to a land of milk and honey it came to Abraham generations before these people. It came to them, and He said, I'm going to make your descendants so numerous, and you're going to fill this land. Now, Abraham was barren. He didn't have any kids at the time. In fact, his first kid wasn't born until he was 100, a little over 100, and his wife around the same age. Like, whew. I don't know about you, but man, 33, I'm like, oof. To have a newborn kid, that could be fun. Sorry, Brandon. But that's what God can do. So the story doesn't end there. It's going to be a lot better. We're going to continue to talk about it over the next couple of weeks. Now, last week we talked about temptation and the power to overcome temptation. And you see, a lot of us oftentimes, we can look at our situation and we can say, like the Israelites, how are we going to get through this? When all we have to do is say, God, how are you going to get me through this? Because if we're not walking with God, if we're not obeying what He wants, if we're not asking Him how we're going to get through it, how can we expect Him to show up and get us through it? See, when Miranda and I decided to move back to Michigan, it was a strenuous, to put it nicely, wandering in the desert for us. Okay, God, where are we going to go? We know it's Michigan. Where? Grand Rapids? Flint? North Branch? Are we going to Walkerville? Are we going to Rockford? Are we going to Cadillac? Are we going to UP? Like, where are we going, God? He's like, just listen. Yeah, I'm not good at listening. I'm good at talking. I'm not good at listening. I'm not good at listening. But when we ask God to do something, He does something radical. He connects people. He helps people to understand each other. He walks with you. He guides you. He directs you. Now, my challenge for you guys this week and in the coming weeks is to read through the book of Exodus. Start in chapter 1. Read through the book of Exodus. And then reread. Now, maybe that's a big book to read. Where do I start? Exodus chapter 1. Tomorrow, today. Just read chapter 1. One chapter. One chapter a day makes it easy. Talk about it with your kids. Talk about it with your spouse. Talk about it as a family. Do it over dinner. Read the book of Exodus and discover God's plan through this exile, through this wandering, through this process. And I think what you'll see is you'll start to see yourself understanding more of the power of God. Our takeaway today is this, that when there seems to be no way, God will make a way. And do we trust God to make a way in every situation, in every circumstance, no matter what comes our way? Do we trust God to make that way?